So this show has no intro. It has a cold open, but I'll ask y'all before we talk about the movie. Do y'all watch football?
Yes.
Kinda.
I'm more of a college football fan. I'm an Ohio State alum.
Okay.
I no longer, growing up, I was a Dallas Cowboys fan until Jerry Jones bought the team, and then I stopped being a Dallas Cowboys fan.
Smart choice.
I could go on for days about that, but yeah.
Go for it. Go right ahead.
So he bought the team. Good for him. But what ticked me off and continues to tick me off, because he showed us behind in doing this, is instead of giving Tom Landry the courtesy of telling him that he was no longer employed, he let the man find out on a golf course from a reporter. Yep. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about this man, nothing will. And I just went, I'm done. As long as he's the owner, I don't care. So now when it comes to college football, when it comes to pro football, what I do is I follow what is happening with former Buckeyes. My goal, my hope every year is at least one former Buckeye will be on the winning Super Bowl team. Unfortunately, that did not happen this year. So to me, the whole thing was sorry, knocked over my pencil case. It was a whole waste of time. But yeah, so yeah, college football is what I follow mostly. Ohio State football. Let me back up. Not the greater college football, mostly Ohio State football.
And Susan, you said sort of. What does sort of mean?
Well, after that answer, I feel like an idiot because
I know what football is. Does that count?
I'm sort of one of those Christmas Catholics, as we used to call back in the day, who show up kind of once a year, maybe twice, maybe Christmas and Easter. So I show up for Super Bowl. Totally love the Super Bowl, and I will show up sometimes for the Atlanta Falcons, my hometown team. And I kind of go back and forth about the Saints, but and then my sister's in North Carolina, so sometimes the Panthers. So that's all I know. I know some names. I've heard of a couple of the big players, but that's about it for me. And I do love the Super Bowl. We throw a Super Bowl party almost every year, and have since Dashel was little, because our son Dashel, when he was very young, like in a Bjorn, we would walk into Old Town, which is about 2 miles from our house, and go to Barney's Beanery every Sunday with his older brothers, my stepsons, when they were pretty young. And we walked in, and it's usually empty because it's a bar, right? Like, so we usually go for breakfast. It's usually empty. We walk in, and it turns out it's opening day for college football. And so every screen, and it's got a lot of them, is tuned to football. And Dashel, who again is like practically a larva, he's maybe 8 months old. I don't even know if he was walking at the time, but he goes, he was entranced by football at that point in his life, and then stayed entranced for, probably until he was, 6 or 7. If we were any kind of sport watching family, he probably would have stayed entranced. I should have just sent him over to Sharon. And so we started the Super Bowl parties because he cared. And for a while I would watch Monday Night Football with him because he cared. But Rich is not a sport guy and not a sport watching guy. So I have to force him every year. I'm like, we're throwing the Super Bowl. He's like, nah. But then when we do, he loves it because he gets to make drinks and create a betting pool. And
oh, of course. That was not the second answer I was expecting, but it tracks.
Yeah. And then, again, as sort of in the industry, watching the ads used to be super fun. It's not as fun anymore now that ads aren't the same thing anymore, right? So,
well, and also they put them all out before the game, so there isn't that anticipation. Oh, what's the commercial going to be? Is this going to be any good? Are they going to suck this year? You never know. But now that you've seen them all, you have the access to them beforehand. It sort of takes all the fun out of it, about that part of it.
And
there are teasers
the
for commercials too now, which I think is like.
And the Super Bowl, it used to be very exciting because there'd be all these different kinds of ads for different things, right? You always knew you were going to get the big movies that were coming. you always knew you'd get some, a lot of car and truck, and Doritos, I guess, for a while.
Can't forget those
whatever the new Dorito
now.
flavor was going to be. But that part of the Super Bowl has become so less interesting than it used to be. And this year, if we want to talk about this past Super Bowl, it's so less, because it was all the same, and it was also so much Fox. I felt like they couldn't sell the ads, and they were just promoting themselves, which you do, right? You get to promote all your shows and stuff. It's all the TV shows that are on that.
This fall on Fox, some shows we're not going to cancel after the first season. We promise. Don't get invested.
We never lie on Fox.
Right. Oh, I like it. A little pointed. Get those claws out. So I was and am a Patriots fan, more a Tom Brady fan. And I have been a Tom Brady fan because I grew up in a household where we did not watch sports. Growing up, I participated in sports like baseball, but I was not allowed to play football for, I think, good reason. I think I would have been good at it, but I also don't want to have CTE or have my knees blown out or anything else. So thankful for that. But when I went to college, I roomed with a whole bunch of people that were all sports journalism majors. And you better find a team to pick and fucking root for, because otherwise you're going to have nothing to talk about. And that was in the fall of 2008, and Tom Brady had his knee blown out that season by the Kansas City Chiefs, of all teams, the Super Bowl Kansas City Chiefs now. So I was like, yeah, all right. I saw a couple interviews with Brady. He seemed like interesting guy. So I was like, I'll cheer for the Patriots. Seems like I picked a good team to cheer for the last 10, 11, 12 years. Obviously, Tom Brady is now retired, which I think is a little kind of ironic now, given that he played much longer than most quarterbacks do and had a much more successful career than most quarterbacks do, especially playing to the age that he played. But that's not to say that cheering for Tom Brady and the Patriots hasn't been interesting, given all of the cheating scandals and all the bullshit surrounding the team. And, we could talk about that for hours, I'm sure. Sharon, my mom is a Cowboys fan, which I find immensely hilarious that you jumped off the bandwagon to the Cowboys in what would that have been, like the 80s?
No, that it was I think early 90s.
Okay, right.
It was
before they won the
90s.
Second tier Super Bowls that they got.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
I was a Cowboys fan too.
I think everybody was for a while, right? Like they're America's team for a reason.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why they're America's team, but
but sure. I'm sure there was a reason.
I mean, they're like the second most financially profitable sports franchise in the world behind Manchester United. So,
well, that's what I go for. The most financially profitable.
I mean,
sports.
If you're Jerry Jones, that's what you go for.
You have to remember the sports landscape was very different back then in that you didn't have access to all the games.
Right. So
the Cowboys were pretty successful. So I think a lot of markets, when given a choice, would put a Cowboys game on. And so more people had access to Cowboys games than probably most other teams. And I think this is my own personal opinion, but I think that's what led to them having such a widespread fan base across the country, especially in those places that maybe didn't necessarily have a team nearby. So now that's all changed, which has also been kind of interesting to me to watch and to see how fandom has changed on the professional side because of the fact that games are so accessible. And so now it's easier to be a Chiefs fan living in Los Angeles and get to see their games than it was 20 years ago when there was almost no way you were going to get to see a Chiefs game, maybe once or twice a year. So it's all different. It's very different now.
To the point where we have a movie about Tom Brady winning the Super Bowl, which is just, it makes sense, right? If you're going to do movies about Michael Jordan, like Mike, which they did in the mid 2000s about, I guess, the foremost basketball player then, and I would say now, come at me, LeBron fans. I think it's interesting, but it makes sense that there is a Tom Brady football movie in the year of our Lord 2023, because Tom Brady's the biggest name in football other than Pat Mahomes.
before we get too deep into this, I think it's important that I mention that I am not a Tom Brady fan. In fact, I am more of an anti-Tom Brady fan. He went in college, he played for the team up north, as we Ohio State fans.
Wow. Oh. Won't even mention the name. Jesus.
No. Not in that context.
I hate Tom Brady at a cellular level, folks.
To the point where I think, as I mentioned earlier, each year I want a former Buckeye to win a Super Bowl ring. And there were years when I was conflicted because the Patriots were playing a team that had no former Buckeyes, and yet there were maybe one or two on the Patriots. So who do I root for? What do I root for? What am I, I have to admit I was conflicted. So the only reason I went to see this movie is because I was like, I ain't going nowhere near this thing once I realized he had something to do with it and was in it. Susan is the one that got me there. So, and ultimately I'm happy she did, but yeah, I feel it's important that I make that clear. I feel about Tom Brady.
So on this episode of the Culture Cast, your dear host, Brady apologist Chris Tashu, is joined by the co-host of the 80s TV Ladies podcast, one of the finest podcasts you can find on the internet over at weirdingwaymedia.com, but more importantly, over at 80stvladies.com. Your friends and mine, the co-host of that show, Sharon and Susan. Sharon, who has outed herself as a Tom Brady hater right at the top of this show.
Proud Tom Brady hater.
You know what though? Like, I get it. Like you to say you were the only one is not the case. I think I've met more people that hate him than like him.
I have a short story to tell about this. In the early 2000s, must have been after they won their first Super Bowl. I'm at the ESPYs, thanks to work. I'm in the VIP area where all of the big sports people are hanging out. And one of my friends says, "Oh, there's Tom Brady. Do you want to go say hello?" I went, "Absolutely not. I have nothing to say to him. No, thank you."
Oh, so fucking hell. Come on. Okay. Jesus.
You get the badge. Do they send you like a patch? Like a I hate Tom Brady patch?
Even the people that I know would have gone up, even the people that I know that don't like him would have gone up to him and been like, "Hey, Mr. Yeah, fuck. That's intense."
Okay. That's okay. There were a lot of other people there to say hello to. I really didn't need to go anywhere near him, including some former Buckeyes. So,
Wow. So on this episode of the Culture Cast, we are going to be talking about the 2023 sports comedy film aptly titled 80 for Brady.
Aren't you tired of the same old boring lives? Let's go to the Super Bowl. I'm in.
On February 3rd.
I'm taken. This one's cute.
Best friends.
So you don't have any tickets? Let's make a run.
Hey, let's go, Golden Girl. Get into the best trouble.
I'm at a party with a bunch of kids.
Why is champagne such a violent beverage?
If you did this to give us something to remember, it worked.
80 for Brady. Only in theaters February 3rd.
So the movie's directed by Kyle Marvin, written by Sarah Haskins and Emily Halpern, and it is produced by Tom Brady. And Tom Brady is actually in it, which is fucking insane. And it stars Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda, Rita Moreno, and Sally Field as four friends, based off of real people, who went to the 2017 Super Bowl where the Patriots, well, they had the greatest Super Bowl victory of all time. I even if you don't like Tom Brady, I don't think there's any, I at least up until now. And it's a story kind of that we've seen before. Four friends who go do something somewhere that is not their home. It's kind of like The Hangover. I don't know how else to describe it. Like it's Hangover adjacent.
That's perfect. That is perfect. Yes.
So I'm going to kick it to you first, Sharon. What did you think of 80 for Brady?
I was pleasantly surprised. I had fairly low expectations. I really wasn't sure what to expect. I'm not someone, I tend to avoid, no, who am I kidding? I very vociferously avoid trailers of movies because they give too much away. So I really didn't know much about it other than the women that were in it and that it was about these women going to the Super Bowl. It's basically all I knew. But I found it quite entertaining, charming. Of course, I knew going in I would love all of our leading ladies. I did not know that we'd see as much of Tom Brady as we did. So it's probably just as well I didn't know that. Nevertheless, I found myself really enjoying it. Very found it to be much more enjoyable than I ever expected.
You, Susan, Shanghaiing your poor co-host here to go watch a Brady movie. Want to go watch this movie that's totally not about Tom Brady?
Now, to be fair, I didn't know the white hot hatred that Sharon has for
Just in Avatar 2.
The burning sensation of having to watch Tom Brady. I did not know that was going to exist for her. I was excited about the ladies and the 80s. Because see, they're 80 in the movie, but they're also ladies from the 80s, and they're going to see Tom Brady. Is his number 80? I don't know what the 80 is, if I can do anything else with the 80. But oh no, they had shirts made. So in the real story, I guess they had shirts made that they wore and went together to see this. So all I was thinking of was this would be really fun for us all to go see for our, for 80s TV ladies, because, the ladies. And then I found out that Sharon, I think my expectations though were also surpassed, because I really was not expecting it to be as charming as it was. It was delightful to watch these ladies do their thing, which I thought I'd get a couple of scenes. I was hoping for a couple of scenes. I was hoping for a couple of moments. The story is weird, so anyway, we will get into it in a minute. But
there is barely a story, okay? Like story. Yeah, I get it.
The charm was pretty off the hook. And I'm going to include Tom Brady in that. Kind of unexpected, because I don't have really strong feelings. I just have a general unease with the Tom Brady of it all.
You just make me uneasy. You know that?
Like no one should be that much of a winner, right? Like, and again, we sort of all deflation gate or whatever it was. Like, I don't know anything about it, but anyway, it just feels like it's like rooting for the Yankees. You're like, you kind of can't do it. You couldn't for a while. I guess they're not the winners they used to be, but
that is correct.
Like,
that is beyond. That is correct.
But the movie, it was a delightful movie-going experience.
I did not have high hopes for this movie any more than I think the three of us did, given that, again, it just kind of came out. I saw very little press for it, very little advertisement. Look, I guess Tom Brady would still have been playing when this movie came out, because the movie came out right at the beginning of February and he just retired. So, again, pretty topical. He had his whole waffling last year of, will I retire and won't I? And look, there goes my marriage. So again, like, it's kind of advantageous that a movie about Brady is coming out when he is more or less, again, he's supposedly done. He has retired. And that was big news in February. That happened in February. So it couldn't have come at a better time for this movie. All that out of the way, yeah, it was pretty fun. I mean, look, you have Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda reading the fucking phone book together, and it's going to be entertaining. And then put Sally Field and Rita Moreno in there, and then it becomes a movie. And I think you could have the four of them go and do anything. I realistically, the four of them together have such good chemistry that they should just go and make more movies like this for folks like us who enjoy seeing actresses who are still talented and funny being funny around people that understand how to be funny with that kind of vibe that they all give off. And again, like, they don't lean on the things that I was expecting. I mean, they kind of do with the Rita Moreno character, and it's a little, we've all seen this before, of the, I guess, horny grandma character. Like, I don't know how else to describe what the character, like, I don't know that, but they've done it in other things that I've seen, and here it works better because they're not leaning on it constantly. But I felt like that with all the characters. They don't lean on one of them too much so that it's like, I'm really sick of this gag over and over again. They kind of spread it around, which also works, because if it had just been Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda, I might not have liked it as much. But the fact that we have kind of all four of them and they're all portraying a different personality type, essentially, I think really works for the movie to carry it over a literal lack of plot. Like, it is vignettes, essentially, like vignettes of these women at the Super Bowl, because everything that happens up before the Super Bowl, which is like a half an hour of an hour and a half movie, is not particularly interesting.
And I think Yeah, and there's it feels like the NFL also produced this movie.
Oh my God.
but I also it feels like and I saw this somewhere, I don't know where, it feels like Golden Girls meets The Hangover. So it's these four women sort of they're just great comedians. They're great to watch. Their timing is fantastic. Their ability to kind of run a scene, the Rita Moreno poker thing, fantastic. And that had a nice button to it. I thought that was like really one of my favorite of the bits that they were doing, and they were all doing their own little bits, like Sally Field eating hot wings and
talking about her strap on.
Talking about her strap on, which again, like it really was sort of delightfully filled with moments where these ladies could shine. And it was a big giant ad for how great it is to go to the Super Bowl and spend days before the Super Bowl. Apparently,
we need to go to the NFL experience and throw footballs at targets and win T-shirts. I can tell you that when I went to the Super Bowl, when it was in Dallas, there was not any T-shirt winning of any kind.
Not for you. If you were Jane Fonda.
Oh, well, there you go. That's fair. Very fair.
Going to the Super Bowl is on my bucket list. I have not made that happen yet. I have been to the World Series, but I have not been to the Super Bowl, and I really would like to go.
And so did you actually go to the Super Bowl game?
Yeah. We sat somehow, again, my grandmother, it was on her bucket list. So she took me and my dad, who is her son, and my mom and my sister and we all went, and we ended up sitting where the Packers players' families were sitting, because Donald Driver's like brother, who looks just like Donald Driver, was sitting in front of me, standing up and cheering the whole time. I kept looking at my dad and I was like, that guy looks like fucking Donald Driver. He's got to be his brother. And then we kept looking around and everybody was wearing Packers jerseys. So we're like, okay, this must be the family section, which is pretty shitty because the seats weren't great, but fine. We were at the Super Bowl. But, I've been to the Super Bowl and I've been to WrestleMania twice. And I think I don't need to go to those big events anymore. I'd like to go to the World Series. I would like to go to a World Cup game. But the Super Bowl was a overwhelming experience in a way that things tend to not overwhelm me, And look, I would love to have been there when the Patriots beat the Falcons in 2017. This was in Houston. So I would love to have been there. But yeah, I mean, I get why it's on everybody's bucket list, but I think it's a one and done type thing for sure. For sure. And it was crazy expensive, like $1,200 for a ticket type thing. Like that's I don't know. Nope.
especially not a great seat.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Expect for that kind of money.
Exactly. But they had that there. They had the NFL experience, and like, sure. I mean, you can go to it. It's like a little, it's like, I think it's funny. You mentioned this, Susan. I was thinking about this. Like, it is just one giant ad for the NFL.
But that said, I kind of love the football. It was great to see like a sports movie where you were actually seeing the sporting game play out, and it was a real game, and it wasn't, we've recreated a game or we've done a thing. And clearly it's like, you kind of know they have 500 camera and angles at the Super Bowl, but I feel like we saw stuff that wasn't aired, right? We saw angles that I don't remember seeing from that game, which I did watch because we threw a Super Bowl party for that game, and we were heartbroken.
I was not heartbroken.
Yeah, clearly not.
That was the greatest football watching experience that I ever had.
It was amazing. It was an amazing,
particularly for all
game.
the people that texted me at halftime and then had to really suffer the consequences.
Eat some crow after.
Big fucking crow. I distinctly remember my mom was getting ready to text me because she's not a fan of the Patriots. And my dad was like, don't do it. Don't do it. And she didn't, thankfully, because yeah.
Well, and Brady is kind of known for that, right? Like
known for
coming back from behind, come from behind.
In the Super Bowl, literally in the Super Bowl.
I think you're right. There have been a number of times where, I mean, certainly not to that degree as what happened in this game, where he snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, as the saying goes. where it seemed like they were done, and then lo and behold, miraculously they win. Yeah.
We don't like it.
I don't think anybody who wasn't a Patriots fan didn't like it.
But it was impressive. It was so freaking impressive.
I actually appreciate, because they have Andy Richter, I guess, playing himself? Question mark.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. No, doesn't he play some rich guy in the suite?
He's a rich guy in the suite.
Right.
So I don't think he's it.
Right. So, but what's funny is they have him say to Sally Field, like, or I guess Rita Moreno, he's like, oh, it's like less than a 1%. That was legit. Like at halftime, I remember looking at my phone and being like, it's like less than 1%. It's like less than 1% chance. So I like that I like that this is the story that they're telling, because like you've mentioned, Susan, this is such a memorable game. Everybody who watches the Super Bowl remembers this game, I think, right? I mean, at least in the last 10 years. There hasn't been a Super Bowl more exciting since, frankly.
Although the last one was actually all right. I thought that was great.
In a different way.
Not that. Okay.
I didn't like the outcome, but yeah, I didn't watch the last Super Bowl, actually. I've stopped watching it because to your point about the ads before, both of your points about the ads, like even the ads don't feel the same anymore. So
no. Well, for that 2017 Super Bowl, though, I did not watch it. I had some friends who used to have a Super Bowl party. They moved out of town, I don't know, before that game, and I just kind of was like, I don't really care who wins, other than I'm not interested in the game, really. Besides, there's too many Patriots in the game so many times. But I do remember, somehow I heard during that day, I don't remember where I was, that the Patriots were down quite a bit at halftime. And I thought, oh God, they're going to win. I'm serious. I am absolutely serious. I'm like, I don't know. They're going to win. Somehow they're going to pull this out of their behind. And sure enough.
It was all Lily Tomlin, apparently.
It
was all Lily Tomlin.
That's my favorite thing about this entire movie, is ascribing them winning to Lily Tomlin just going, win the fucking game, Tom Brady.
Yeah. I love that it comes down to basically Lily Tomlin screaming at Tom Brady, them breaking into the call players, right?
Yeah, like what the hell?
With no security, and then basically taking over the mic, and Tom Brady listened. That was lovely. It was lovely, and and so I think it's really their. They won the Super Bowl.
Deus Ex Tomlin.
I mean, which reminds me, I did love all the completely and totally improbable things that happened along the way. Places they ended up being, things they ended up doing that, are like the Patriots winning that game, 1 in 1,000. But still, it was fun and it was charming, and I thoroughly enjoyed all of it.
Well, and a lot of other fun cast. I love the Billy Porter. You say that. I love that there's all sorts of chaos that ensues, of course, and there's lost tickets and found tickets, and they're sneaking around places they're not supposed to be. But at one point, I love the moment where they hook up with Billy Porter, who's the choreographer for part of the halftime show, and then convinces a security guard that they're part of the dance team. To sneak them into the Super Bowl, which apparently, I got to tell you, people watching this going to think it's a lot easier than I imagine it to be.
It does make me wonder if this movie is going to result in more people trying to sneak into things, thinking, oh, this is easy. I can just sort of wander in and people will, nobody's going to care, kind of thing.
Let me find a rich, famous person to vouch for me. That's all it takes. Because all it is they just have rich people vouching for them over and over again. Harry Hamlin shows up and he's like, they're with me. Billy Porter shows up and he's like, they're with me. It's like, Jesus, all these rich people are just enamored with these 4 women.
And the football players are enamored. Like, come onto the party with us. Like, so
come to the locker room, please. I want to meet you face to face. Like, what?
So, and again, I that is the fantasy, sort of fantasy sports football world in a whole different way. But it's also an interesting, it's interesting because they're 80-year-old women, or as Rita Moreno points out, 90. And as Sally Field points out, 75, that they're sort of like kind of not supposed to be there. And so they're an anomaly, even though I don't think they are at the Super Bowl. I'm sure there's people of all ages, shapes,
my
sizes,
grandmother
colors.
wanted to go to the Super Bowl and she was like 75.
Yeah. So But I think there is something about women of a certain age not being recognized, not being taken seriously, and being kind of ignored. And so the idea that 4 80-year-old-ish women can just sort of walk into anywhere and kind of get away with something is kind of interesting, because I want to see these 4 do a caper movie next.
I think actually there's something to the fact that they are women of a certain age that makes it more plausible that they can walk into things like this, because everybody sees their grandmother or that woman in their life of that age, and they're going to treat them a lot differently than they're going to treat somebody who's our age. If you're really young or on the opposite end of the spectrum, you get treated a lot differently than those of us that are closer to the middle, if you will. Nobody wants to be the one that was mean to the grandma. Nobody wants to be caught on tape being mean to the grandma, especially these days with people with phones and stuff. I mean, you don't want to be that person. So I think I can see where there's a higher level of plausibility of them being able to make their way through these spaces that they don't belong than somebody who's 30 or 40, because nobody's going to care at that point when you're that age.
And I should mention, because I mentioned my grandmother, it was on her bucket list. That's because my grandmother cheered for the fucking Steelers and wanted to see Roethlisberger play in the Super Bowl, because once my grandfather passed away, all my grandmother did on the weekend was watch football, college and professional football. And that's all she would do. She would just sit and read and watch football all weekend. And so to wax poetically, what I appreciate about this movie is it also shows that there are plenty of other people watching football that aren't just people my age or people y'all's age or people younger than me. Because again, like you have both said, there is this expectation that, I guess, I don't want to mass generalize women, but again, I don't know what the perception is of people who watch football, but I think the perception is men of a certain age getting together and all watching football. And the people that I know that are super into sports are not men. They are women. And one of them is my mom. And my mom is a bigger Cowboys fan than I know most people are of the teams that they cheer for. And I appreciate that this movie also is showing representation of women of a certain age who you would not think are watching football are into football, more into football than more people I know. These 4 women who actually existed are more into the Patriots than I ever could hope to be. And you would not assume that, given, again, what we're supposed to believe the people who watch sports in this country, especially football, are.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I know a lot of women who are football fans. All 3 of my former college roommates, we're all big Ohio State fans. I know that out of us, Deb is probably the one that mostly, I think everybody watches the games, but Deb has a friend where she lives in Ohio, and they go to the bar every week to go watch the game. When we got together for our little reunion this year, we made sure that it was, our plan on Saturday was to sit in the Airbnb we rented and watch the game. Planned all around that, because we used to watch games together when we were in college, and that's sort of part of our thing. Both of my sisters are sports fans. My mother's a sports fan. One of my sisters is more of a basketball than football fan, much more basketball. So yeah, a lot of women are football fans. A lot of women are sports fans in general. Right. And it's not as taken as seriously in a lot of ways as you might think it would be. Although I will say that in recent years, the NFL has had a line of jerseys specifically tailored for women, as opposed to women just having to, put on a jersey that was designed for a man. So there is some recognition that, hey, maybe some of the ladies do want to watch this, and we should pay attention to that. So I think that's good.
My wife definitely owns a Tom Brady woman's jersey, and I definitely bought it for her. But, again, I think it's an unfair generalization, but I think it's one that is constantly made, because when you see advertising for fantasy football and other sports things, they are catering and tailoring it towards men. And I think it's unfair because, like you've just mentioned, Sharon, with examples of my own life, and I'm sure, Susan, you could echo this. A movie like this, I think, does a lot to show and give everybody an idea that the football watching world is not just a bunch of sweaty dudes in a man cave on Sunday. And I think to break society of that perception is important because I think it opens up the game to a different set of advertisers, a different group of people being involved and being active in the game, and hopefully pushing the game in a more civilized direction, because when a player almost dies on the field because of how unsafe football actually is, maybe things need to change. And I know I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but I more or less stopped watching the NFL this past year because of the lack of kind of addressing of CTE, how dangerous it is. And again, it's a dangerous sport. It's the most dangerous sport in the world outside of actual contact sports like MMA or boxing. But it's kind of hard to rubber stamp the NFL, but at the same time, I think it's important that more people than just men of a certain age watching football are being catered to. Because again, even the ads during football are normally Budweiser, and it's like, Jesus Christ, like, you think only men watch this? Like, because they're really not.
Yeah, I thought that was. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Susan.
Oh, I just thought it was really interesting that this movie came out like February 3rd, the week before the Super Bowl, so that on Super Bowl weekend, it could be counter programming to the Super Bowl. They were thinking it. For people that were like not Super Bowl people, this might be something to do. And definitely the audience for 80 for Brady, the target audience were women of a certain age.
Right.
It just, and so that I thought was really interesting, even though I think there are, there's a lot of women that watch the Super Bowl, and there's a lot of women that then the week after the Super Bowl probably went to saw 80 for Brady to sort of wrap up their football love. So I do think it's interesting that this movie did really well. Like it almost beat whatever the Shyamalan.
Knock at the Cabin.
Yeah, it came very close to beating it for the weekend. It definitely had more ticket sales. It just had more matinee ticket sales, and then it's held pretty well. And I think that is both because it's a comedy, and I think we're now in a space where actually having the ability to laugh and do something that feels fun and light and joyful and goofy is desirable to a lot of people in the country. But also because of the power of those ladies, and that it hits a lot of target audiences. It's going to hit your Super Bowl audience, your Tom Brady fan, and if you like any of those ladies, there's a reason to go see this movie.
And you mentioned Tom Brady. He is a bigger part of this movie than I was expecting him to be. I mean, we kind of mentioned he shows up at the end, obviously, but I guess Lily Tomlin's spirit guide is Tom Brady, because she has those scenes where, again, you have her looking at the screen and it's obviously not talking to her. And then she looks up again and it's talking directly to her. And we've seen this before in other things, but it's done well here because, again, I share, and I know you're not a fan of Tom Brady, but he is a charismatic human being, I think, at his core. And I think even if someone is not a fan of him, they would be like, oh, okay, like I could see what his deal is. Because again, I don't know how many people have seen him do anything other than throw a football, but he pretty well-spoken guy, and he has pretty good comedic timing as well. But I'm surprised he was in it as much as he was, given, I mean, yeah, he's producing the movie, but most of the time people who are producing movies or at least mentioned in a movie like this don't show up 5 or 6 times. It's like, oh, one time at the end. Maybe it's like a really extended cameo, which it would have been if they hadn't done anything else.
No, you're right. He did very well in his role, I thought. And he was in the movie more than I was expecting him to be, as well. But I don't know that I've seen him do anything in any commercials or anything, because I don't tend to watch a lot of commercials in general. But I would imagine he's done some, so that I'm sure helped. And I'm sure he got as much help as he could from. Tom Brady being Tom Brady, I'm sure he worked his ass off,
right,
before he stepped in front of the camera to deliver those lines, because that's just the kind of guy he is, and you don't get to be a 6-7-time Super Bowl champion by accident. I know it's at least 6. I know he's got more
7.
than
It's 7 because it's 7 one time with the Buccaneers. Yep.
So I'm sure he did a lot of preparation, because that's just how he's built. So I give him credit for that.
He has never eaten a strawberry. That was what he had claimed at one point, which is like,
Why?
he's like a health nut during the, like Sharon just said, he's like, I don't know what he is, but he's hyper focused on being the best at football to the point where he's vegan during the season. He doesn't like drink soda. He doesn't eat sugary fruit.
Okay. All right. Cause I was like, strawberries are vegan.
I know, but he's I don't know. He's one of those, he's like that guy everybody knows who is at the, repertory hall until 5 a.m. practicing the same scale over and over again. But he also happens to be the person where it pays off for them. Not everybody can do that a million times and it actually matter. He just happens to be, one of those people.
Sometime in the last couple of years, he was on Stephen Colbert's late night show. And I remember Stephen bringing up the strawberry thing. And Stephen either got him to eat a strawberry or drink a beer. And I cannot remember which, because that's something else he doesn't do.
Right.
He doesn't, but so listen, I'm sure it's something they cleared with him before the show or whatever, but still.
Ambushed him right then and there. You're going to fucking eat one of these, Tom.
Right. Or drink this beer,
Thank God for the internet. It was eat a strawberry.
Okay.
But that's fascinating to me. And, and I, again, coming in without as passionate the feelings as the two of you, he was great. Like I had my little I'm suspicious. But he was so warm in his scenes, particularly at the end of the movie, that you're like, oh, I totally buy this. It felt less awkward. Like, I think there's that Saturday Night Live appearance that many sports players can get to.
And he's been on it at least once, I think.
And I think that's a time I've seen him, and it's always charming, but it always feels like a little bit of like the high school football captain is in the musical, kind of moment where you're like, okay, well, he's tall. But
tall and good looking, Susan.
Sometimes just tall, but in this case, I gotta give you tall and good looking. I mean, all the football players in this movie were great. I was sort of surprised how natural they seemed, and all of them, and particularly Tom Brady. And again, you just got that wonderful thing, because I don't think those ladies are all that tall. And so the fact that they were just towers of people was just so wonderful. And I recognize that as being that's what professional sports people are, way taller than actors, period, usually. And so, you usually see sports movies and it's, Dennis Quaid, he's fine. He's a probably above average size guy, but he is not a football player size guy, real life football player, or real life. Melissa, who is our producer on 80s TV Ladies, her dad was a sports attorney. And so through her, I once met AC Green. We hung out with AC Green, who was giant basketball player and a very, very large person. And it's so weird. They're so big.
Yeah.
It is so weird. We took back, we hung out with him in Arizona because I guess he had just gone from the Lakers to the Suns or something. And then he's like, and they always have these big voices. Oh, can you drive my shoes back? And we're like, what? And he had 2 duffel bags full of shoes that were either his or he were giving them away or something. And he needed to get them back to LA. So we drove his shoes back. And so I got to put on AC Green's shoes, which it was it was so fun, but it really does feel like you're like a robot person. You're not a real live human being.
I mean, that's fair.
But anyway, so I love that, because you really did get that feeling when they did get to meet the players, that these were real sports figures. But I also loved how warm they were in the scenes that they were in. It was really fun. That was really fun.
I think Tom Brady also is drawing from personal experience, because they show it at the end of the movie for a second, him and his mom, because I believe during the 2017 season, his mom had cancer. And so it's kind of, interesting that they then have Lily Tomlin's character, who maybe has cancer. Her and Tom Brady end up being the ones who share, the bulk majority of the scenes together, which is obviously the smartest person, I think, in the movie to have opposite Tom Brady is the immaculate Lily Tomlin. But I think also it's interesting because there's like a metatextualness to that scene that if you know about, because again, it feels like, again, we don't know what Tom Brady felt or thought about his mom having cancer, but like that's the closest you'll ever get to see to that. But it's interesting because, like you said, it feels really warm and real because I think it really was. Like, it was coming from a place of like really understanding the expectation of that scene. I think it really works. I also would really like to read Jane Fonda's Gronkowski sexual erotica, which I think is like one of the better subplots of this movie that has a great payoff at the end too.
Yes, it really does. And that's what I was thinking of, is how the
Gronkowski. Yeah, he's huge.
And that was really, again, everybody, I love that each of the women got something for their character that, just had a lot of delightful insight into it, and surprise. And you're just like, you just want to watch them. I mean, like, there just wasn't enough of them. Like, I just want more Sally Field. I want more Rita Moreno. I want more Jane Fonda and more Lily Tomlin. Apparently, we're going to get it. So on March 17th, Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda star in a movie that's coming out that is called Moving On. And I can't believe it's coming like right on the heels. It feels like Paramount would be like, hold up, whoever's releasing that movie. I would
watch The Hangover with the four of them, like a movie. I would watch a R-rated version of this movie. That would be my kind of only complaint, is that this movie is PG-13. Mm-hmm. Like, it totally needed to be R. I think it would have played better for the audience that it was going for if it had been R, because I don't think Lily Tomlin or Jane Fonda or Rita Moreno or Sally Field have any issue saying fuck or shit or anything else. And I think that would have been, that's like my only big complaint with the movie, is I think it would have played better if they had allowed them to go a little bit raunchier, a little like hew closer to what we kind of know and expect from Lily Tomlin and from the four of them, because they kind of touch on it with the strap-on joke or the erotica with Gronkowski. But I think it would have been interesting if they had just kind of pushed that a little bit more.
I wouldn't have been surprised if maybe the original script was edgier and was R. But I got to tell you, having worked at a studio, there is a downside to releasing a movie like this as an R rating. Sure. You're just not going to make as much money, because in this case, grandmothers could bring their kids to this, to their grandkids to this movie, and they could enjoy it together, just as they could take their kids to the Super Bowl, or their grandkids. That's
fair. But to be fair, my grandmother would have taken me to see this PG-13 or R. So,
well, I'll give you that, but not everybody would.
That was my grandmother. Your specifically.
Grandma is clearly cooler.
I only mention it because Emily Halpern was one of the co-writers on Booksmart, which I really, really liked.
Yes.
I think that was like, what's her name? Beanie Feldstein, Jonah Hill's sister, where it's the two girls in high school who are about to graduate. Olivia Wilde directed it. It's a lot of fun. And I when I saw that she was one of the writers on this, I was like, oh, okay. It kind of has that feel to it where it's a comedy that's more smartly written than it probably deserves to be. Because again, honestly, the thing that's more surprising about this movie is it doesn't really feel like a cash grab, which these movies totally kind of always are, especially one that feels like it's made by and for the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, for all the, like, again, it feels like the perfect mix of capitalism and heart.
Right. Yeah.
I would imagine Tom Brady being one of the producers. The NFL was happy to do whatever the movie wanted them to do. As long as they got him on board, he could say, hey, we want, do whatever. Sure, you can have that. Do whatever you want with it. It's fine. I would imagine they would have been very, very helpful to this movie in ways they might not have been in other movies.
Well, for sure. And then they could also go, oh, and by the way, I think you should have a scene at the NFL Experience. Maybe 5 scenes at the NFL Experience. It was just delightful. And again, I think the other thing is each of these women are powerhouse women, right? alone together. Like, and again, you're like Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda obviously have their television show, and that has been on for 4 or 5 seasons.
I think it just ended even like last year, maybe. It was on for a while. I saw it in the first season, and that was like a long time. I wasn't living here when I saw the first season of that show, so it was a while ago.
Grace and Frankie has been on. I got to figure out how long it's been on.
7 years, 2015 to 2022.
Yeah, I mean, they're they're on a long time series.
It's a long time for Netflix.
It is a long time for Netflix. We may never see shows. May never see 7 series again on Netflix.
Yeah, for real.
It probably helped that it came that it started as early as it did, as in Netflix doing original scripted stuff. But one of the things I remember thinking as I was watching the movie is, while I appreciated they each had something to do that allowed them to go off and shine. Sally Field with the hot wings, Rita Moreno with the poker game, etc. I really wanted more of them together. I really would have enjoyed more of them doing whatever they were doing together, or maybe even in pairs at least, more than what we got there. I guess I just wanted more of them. I would have been happy to sit there another half an hour.
I'm with you 100%.
Absolutely. I did get the feeling watching it. I'm like, oh, they couldn't all work the same days. Like they all were like, okay, we'll give you 10 days for each lady. And so it's like, okay, we're going to schedule them all this, but then we got 2 days with Rita Moreno, but we don't have anybody else. And we got 2 days with Sally Field, but we don't have anybody else. Even though, again, because their scenes together are great, they did. So I did see a lot of marketing for this movie, which is unusual because I don't typically notice a lot of marketing for movies, which is also unusual because I worked in marketing for movies. So I like to notice it. It's just harder and harder to notice it because I don't spend as much time on social media or watching ad television. But I did. They found me, and I am the target for this. So whatever algorithms they got going, and I saw them everywhere, and I saw all the snippets of their interviews they did the press for this movie to open it as well as they did, and they were delightful together, and those interviews are delightful, and they're all talking about who's got an Emmy and an Oscar and how many, and a Grammy and a Tony, and Rita Moreno, I didn't realize until this movie publicity push is an EGOT.
Oh, yeah.
She's got them all.
Yeah.
That's not easy. That's like being an astronaut, man.
She may have been one of the first ones that EGOTted, or whatever the terminology is.
The 4 of them were on Trixie Mattel's YouTube channel, which I don't know if y'all know who Trixie Mattel is.
I do. Were they really?
Yeah, the 4 of them to advertise this movie. Trixie Mattel is drag, if for those of you who don't know. But the 4 of them are on there, and Trixie Mattel is asking them questions, and it's as wild as it sounds. That was the only piece of advertising I saw. I was actually kind of disappointed because, as someone who is a Patriots fan, I would have thought the algorithm would have found me somehow. Because Susan, you were like, hey, there's this movie called 80 for Brady. And I was like, Brady is in Tom Brady? And you're like, yeah. And I was like, oh, what the fuck? Like, I had never heard of it until you mentioned it, which I found to be shocking.
Wow.
That is shocking. Because if you're a Patriot fan, you should have been, this movie targeted to you.
Right.
Did you watch any of the playoff games or any of the leading up to the Super Bowl? Or?
I didn't. That may have been why.
Yeah, because I would imagine they were carpet bombing the Super Bowl. I mean, those games with ads for this movie. Even after the whatever team Brady was, Tampa Bay was out of the running. Because that's kind of their audience. That's a lot of their audience that I think they were hoping to reach. Susan, I'm sure if there's somebody listening to this that knows something or is involved in marketing, they would love to figure out how in the world they got to you.
I saw
a football fan
constantly, yeah,
and didn't get to Chris, football fan. That is a case study in and of itself. That would be so interesting.
And I am glad that this movie exists, because I am glad that these actresses are still able to carry a movie together. Like, somebody is going, you know what? We don't need to constantly just trot the current actors out these actresses are still able to kill it together. And I really hope that somebody takes the 4 of them, or at least 3 of the 4, or adds another one. Because that's the other thing. The 80 for Brady women is actually 5 women. It's not 4.
The original?
That this is the people that these are based off of is 5. So I would actually ask y'all, as kind of an interesting question, if there had been a 5th person, who would that 5th person have been, and why should it not be Dolly Parton? Why is it not just Dolly Parton? It would just make no sense, but there we go.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the main reason is how would Dolly Parton and all her Dolly Partonness, her accent in particular, her, growing up in Tennessee, because I don't know that you can get away from that, be a Tom Brady fan.
Is it clear where this takes place in the movie? Like, where do they live?
They do, because they talk about they're traveling. So I think they talk about they're getting on an airport. So they're northeast, I want to say.
I'm pretty sure they're in Massachusetts, Boston.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I mean, I think they're in the heart of the Patriots country is where is where they are. But I mean, if they could figure out some way to put Dolly Parton in this, I'd be there for that. I'd be absolutely there for that.
Well, they could meet up with Dolly Parton in Houston.
I just feel like at that point, then it's just Dolly Parton playing herself. I feel like that
should have.
I think the issue is if you put Dolly Parton in this, like Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin and Rita Moreno and Sally Field are playing characters, quote unquote, but they're pretty much just playing themselves, right? So, I mean, maybe Dolly Parton would have been a step too far, but if it wasn't Dolly Parton, is there another actress that could slot into this mix?
The Golden Girls were still around, and that would be fun.
Jean Smart, but they're not. Jean Smart was not. These women were all movie stars.
Yeah.
What about Annie Potts?
Again, Annie Potts. All the women that we might come up with would be amazing, but I think it's more of like a Meryl Streep or a
legacy, like big legacy. Yeah, because you said Rita Moreno's an EGOT, right?
Yeah,
I think Lily Tomlin is EGT, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the issue. It's like I mentioned Dolly Parton only because I think Dolly Parton's legacy can stand up to the 4 of their legacies as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
for sure. Who would that be? Because it would be an 80s TV ladies, but it might be more of like an 80s film lady, because it was such a different time for film. So if you were a film star, it was at a different level in some ways than being a TV star in the 80s.
It's also kind of horrifying because if you think about it, like these 4 women kind of are in a class of their own. And the fact that it's hard to come up with someone else.
Whoopi Goldberg. I would put Whoopi Goldberg up there.
Diane Keaton. Maybe?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Kathleen Turner, Glenn Close, Meryl Streep.
Oh, Glenn Close would be fun.
The woman from Schitt's Creek, Catherine O'Hara. Yeah. But like, even then it's like now she is there, but this was being cast based off of like everything that you know about them coming into this. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, hey, Dolly Parton, as far as I'm concerned, you just have slap Dolly Parton on the poster behind the 4 of them. We're good to go. And you cover a completely different base of people. You get a completely different group of people in to see this movie.
And it weirdly went not as noticed as I thought it would, because again, I think if they had thrown them into the movie, which I think they should have and could have somewhere in the NFL experience, Dolly Parton wrote a song for this movie.
Right. That's my point. So, like, it's kind of weird.
So yes, I'm sorry, not Dolly Parton. She sings a song. Diane Warren, who, again, if you know anything about popular music, Diane Warren is maybe the greatest modern singer-songwriter in terms of just sheer number of hits.
She's close to 20 Oscar nominations at this point without a win.
Without a win. I just assumed.
But let's complain about Leonardo DiCaprio for 5 minutes, okay? It doesn't matter because they're not actors, all right? Got it. Yeah. Oh, understood. Fine.
So there is a song, Gonna Be You, which I think is not a great title, but Gonna Be You, written by Diane Warren, performed by Dolly Parton, Belinda Carlisle, Cyndi Lauper, Gloria Estefan, and Debbie Harry. So I do think if you had them performing that song at the party or at the NFL experience, or even just walking by and doing some goofy thing with them, you would have been golden. But you may not be able to get Dolly Parton for a cameo like that without giving her, a wheelbarrow of cash.
I don't know if someone who has an entire theme park named after them needs said wheelbarrow anymore.
I don't say she needs it, but what is interesting, and I think this is interesting, particularly for actresses who have come up through the business over the last 5 decades, 6 decades, whatever it's been, more. You get it because a guy would. It's like, forget whether you need it or not. You get it so that you push that bar up a little higher for the women.
Yep.
Who are getting paid less than the men. Just 99 times across the board.
It's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think particularly with Dolly Parton, who is so business savvy, and it's like, no, if you're getting me, you're paying for Dolly Parton, and Dolly Parton does not come cheap.
Dolly Parton doesn't leave the house.
Then she'll give away and invest in all sorts of amazing things, from COVID vaccines to children's books, to books for every child in America. But I think you gotta pay these women, what they're worth.
I love that Dolly Parton refuses to be seen not done up. That right there for me is like, fuck yeah. But it's also like a sad kind of condemnation of the industry as a whole. But at the same time, you have to understand why. And I totally do. But
well, that doesn't mean that she's not out in the wild without the big wig and everything. But it's a way for her to, maybe it's just a way for her to have a semblance of anonymity as she's until she opens her mouth, of course, and then.
It's like fucking Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
You kind of look like Dolly Parton. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, right. Me either.
It's interesting. Like, I think it's so, like, because, I watched that Dolly Parton documentary, and you're like, you don't know, you learn facts about Dolly Parton, but you don't learn more. You're like, we're going to find out the real Dolly Parton. I don't think any of us get that. None of us are paying enough to get that. So, because I think that is her shield, her Captain America suit.
It's a character.
Is who she presents.
Yeah.
And none of us deserve to get that, except for, I guess, her husband and.
Our world doesn't deserve someone like Dolly Parton any more than it deserves Guy Fieri, for that matter. I love Guy Fieri. I think he's fantastic in this movie, and he is an awesome human being. He puts his money where his mouth is in regards to being a philanthropist. And I always love seeing him in things because I think while he is the butt of many a Flavortown inspired joke, if you do any more than 5 minutes of research about Guy Fieri, you'll find out that he is a genuinely upstanding human being. And I love seeing him in things.
Yeah. I honestly, don't know that much about him because I tend not to, I don't really follow the food chef sort of world.
Sure.
I'm aware of him, but I don't know anything about him. But that's good to know. I will definitely be doing some looking into him after we're done here.
He was one of the few people that put together a COVID fund for out of work people who were working in the restaurant industry during the pandemic. He was the one who mobilized a huge groundswell of that. And that was just one of the many things that Guy Fieri has done, to the point where, again, if you think about what Guy Fieri does for a living, he goes to restaurants that people were probably not going to go to the way that they go to them now, if not for diners, drive-ins, and dives. And that show is literally just free advertising. That's all it is. I cannot applaud someone enough for going, hey, these mom and pop places that people are going to, but not in droves, they need more business. And I again, as altruistic as it is with his pile of money that he has, I'm sure, but I like seeing him in things playing. He's not going to play a character because he, like Dolly Parton, he is a character. So he's just playing himself.
Yeah. And again, I thought all of the, Sarah Gilbert is playing Lily Tomlin's daughter, right? Which, it's weird because it feels like they were very much thinking of the 80s.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Who can we cast? Oh, Roseanne's daughter. I think they were very mindful when they were casting this and clearly getting people to do songs for this. I wish they had sort of leaned into it even more. I wanted more songs from Belinda Carlisle. I want and Dolly Parton. But I would love to
now that I think about it, the NFL experience, they should have had a stage, and every time they walked through there was a different band playing, a different group of women on stage playing a song or something.
Right.
What a missed opportunity.
They were at a party where they could have had live music. I mean, again, you have Lily Tomlin and Sally Field dancing together, which I didn't not appreciate, but there's an opportunity to have Dolly Parton show up and do her thing.
I mean, and again, like it would be perfectly believable, not just in the life of the movie, which has fantastical elements in it, but particularly in the life of we're at a party before the Super Bowl where the NFL football players are. Of course, Dolly Parton's going to do a song at that party. Of course, Diane Warren is going to introduce it. Like, I kind of wanted the entire like party to be filled with people that if you were like an 80s person or loved those women or even loved 80s football, I don't know, you were like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But I guess they did have a lot going on, just.
Well, it was kind of surprising that they have Harry Hamlin playing a former football player when they could have just gotten a former football player. Like, but again, Harry Hamlin, makes sense.
He makes sense. He did fine. He did good. I think it was lovely. That was a lovely little, moment for Jane Fonda. I think if you were going to have to act opposite Jane Fonda, you're going to have to be a hell of a good actor, football player.
Yeah. And also Bob Balaban's in the movie for like in another movie, almost essentially. Like I do him and Sally. Is it Lily Tomlin? Who is
Sally Field?
Do they share a scene together at any point?
I think so. Yeah. As she's getting packed for the trip.
I think, that's it. Yes. Otherwise, it's like I'm calling in from a set somewhere.
That was such an interesting thing. It was such an interesting thing because it did have a little bit of an arc to that character. But it was I don't know. It was a very it was almost like it was in a different movie. Even the arc was almost like from a different movie.
It's like this movie didn't need it, I think, is the issue.
Well, they had to give each of them a life outside of the friendship, I think, and everybody else had their thing. And I
did they?
Well,
they did because like Sarah Gilbert for
but I mean, like,
Lily,
did
Lily
they though? If they just had them going
diagnosis and
doing more stuff together, I mean, I think it detracts from the four of them together is more kind of the issue.
I feel like for stuff like that is all artifacts from the original screenplay, which I imagine would have made more sense on the page,
right?
And was building character on the page and story on the page that ultimately was like, but we need the NFL experience. Okay, just cut that scene. And we're going to cut it down to one, phone call. And instead we're going to do, Sally Field eating hot wings in a contest. So because we need that time and we need that. And so I think as this movie gets developed and the logistics of this movie and the logistics of how long can we have Tom Brady? How long can we have Rita Moreno? Because Rita Moreno is working 9 to 5 every day. She's 90, but she is in everything. She is, but so I think it just, I feel like in movies now, I'm often like, okay, how did this get developed? What is the story? Where is the story start to break? I'm just constantly watching movies now in a kind of a different way, even than I did when I was studying film or starting out, because I'm also working from producer standpoint. Like when I started out, I just was looking at it from a writer standpoint, director standpoint, maybe. But now I'm like, oh yeah, that probably was a more interesting and made more sense, that relationship, what it meant to the movie, all that stuff. And it had to go because we had to do, we had to blossom other things. So something had to get cut.
Does doing that change your ability to enjoy what you're watching as your brain is kind of trying to fill in these blanks or put the puzzle pieces together? Or is it something you think about after the movie's over as opposed to while it's happening?
It's weird. It's sometimes like a little bit of an out of body experience. Like it's a little bit like it's there. It doesn't typically detract. If I'm not enjoying the movie, it actually, sort of comes more to the forefront because then it's more fun to be like, okay, where did they go wrong? What is pissing me off about this movie? Why is it happening? No, but I think with movies, it's kind of second nature now. Like it's sort of like if you can hear, voices or get, other dimensions, at a certain point you learn to kind of, you hear it, but you don't necessarily, you don't always tune into it. And it depends on the movie. If I'm really enjoying the movie and it's surprising me, sometimes that stops.
With regard to Sally Field's character and the character of her husband, I felt like the times we saw or they were having conversations together, it was like a different movie. It was a totally different movie. They talked, her friends talked about her being this math genius, and then she's talking to her husband, and she's, instead of doing her own thing, she's trying to get him. She's more of a help to him as opposed to someone who's able to do something on her own. I don't know. It was just it just was.
It felt like that's what they were doing. That there was that Sally Field, who had this amazing, sort of mathematical professor career, was now in kind of retirement, basically just become a helpmate to her husband, who clearly also a professor, but ultimately was being kind of shepherded in the end of his career by her. And which I don't doubt is a story that happens to a lot of women, professional women. I think there's a whole Glenn Close movie where she's like written all the books and he's getting out. Yeah. So, but it was a different movie. And so that, like, when you think about Booksmart and the writer of Booksmart, there's a different movie that a screenplay, like, to me, there was a screenplay that was developed that was way more road. How do we get from that? They drive to Houston, right? They don't get on a plane and fly, that they're driving to Houston. And the first half of the movie is they're trying to get to the Super Bowl, and all the Lily Tomlin calls are happening in that early part, because they kind of got like where it's clear she's sort of running away from her potential cancer diagnosis. And so I think that's where I'm like, oh, there was a movie. I feel like there's a version of the screenplay that was written first, maybe even before Tom Brady. I mean, I don't know. This may have been developed just for him, but there may have been a version of like those ladies going to see the Super Bowl because they're big Brady fans, but in the real life, they didn't meet Tom Brady at the Super Bowl. They didn't meet a football player at the Super Bowl.
They did meet him eventually. Through the magic of technology.
Yes. But I think there's a screenplay, potentially there's a screenplay that happened before this screenplay that got shot that was way more subtle, way more kind of, Golden Girls meets The Hangover, and less NFL football and more personal character stories. I'm completely maybe lying, and it may have been Tom Brady going, could you a little more scene where I'm really, really sensitive?
Well, you don't have Bob Balaban in your movie and make him self-assured. I mean, that's just not something you do with an actor like Bob Balaban. I think what's interesting is if you again, because we mentioned The Hangover, if you think about it in terms of The Hangover, I think in The Hangover, it takes like 15 minutes to get to Las Vegas. In this movie, it takes a half an hour to get to effectively where the rest of the movie is. And I think what they could have done is just streamline the first third of the movie. Because
there's all this other story going on. That's why I think there was
Glenn Turman, and it's like
is Rita Moreno in? She has a house, but she's living in a senior place because her husband, I guess, had needed to be there. But then she's meeting this other guy, and you clearly there was stories built.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. There was a version of this movie that was about the women and their story before that may again have taken 20 pages, but gave you a lot more of here's my story, here's my story, here's my story, here's my story. And we all need this. So Lily Tomlin's going to make it happen so they can all run away from their stories and have this one last adventure together. And so that feels like the root that started this vine that became this other thing, which is how movies get developed, particularly movies this big and this involved, of many large personalities and giant expectations. So I like the Booksmart. I love Booksmart, and it's a character movie. Yeah. It is a movie of character and little adventures that are life-changing, right? And so that and about friendship and things like that, and desire. But I don't know. So I just in my dream, I can, have all these other movies exist too, as well as this one, which I perfectly enjoyed.
Well, and I think, again, like I think it would have benefited from a little bit more time because, like you mentioned, Sharon and Susan, like the four of them on screen is when the movie is really firing on all cylinders, and there's not enough of it. And if there had been less Rob Corddry and Harry Hamlin and Bob Balaban, like I would have been fine. It's not that I don't care about their characters, but their character motivations aren't, they're clearly not the point that this movie is trying to tell. And the movie does feel at odds with itself sometimes because the stuff that's funny and entertaining is better than the moments that are trying to be character development outside of the moment that Lily Tomlin has with Tom Brady at the end, which is a nice moment.
But here's the interesting thing. In The Hangover, all of those guys have stories back home, right? And we get as much of those stories in The Hangover. And that's because you can cast a woman to do this much in a movie, but if you're going to cast Harry Hamlin and those other actors, you got to give them this much of a movie.
Oh, that's a good point.
You got to give them something to do because they won't do it otherwise.
I wouldn't say no to like 5 minutes on screen and then fucking back off to my trailer to eat craft service. I'm just saying, cast me in this movie. I'll go stand around for 2 minutes and say hi to Jane Fonda and then sit in craft service. I don't care. Why would anyone care? Like, that's so non-actory, but like, why the hell would anybody care?
But they do because
right.
And it's true because I've been in that situation with developing projects and you're like, but yeah, there's not enough for the guy to do. And I'm like, because he's the romantic interest and he's just going to stand there and look pretty. Like, or whatever. Like, you're like, because it gets brought up more than you think. Well, I need something for my character to do. And I'm like, you're in support of her. Like, but that's not enough. So you can't ever say that. Why
even give them romantic leads is my point. Like that is such an old way of telling a story. I know, but I think I think it's more important to go further and break those storytelling conventions completely and not feel like
for Brady.
I'm just saying in anything we should, because I think to constantly feel like we need to insert a love interest into a narrative just because that's the expectation doesn't feel any better.
Again, I don't feel like this. I mean, the love interest stuff is pretty slim. And
but it still takes up time.
One is an established, but I think it's you want to differentiate your characters, right? So Sally Field is still married. They have a marriage that clearly has settled into something that is less comfortable for Sally Field than it is for her husband. Jane Fonda is a butterfly who's flying from relationship to relationship and can never find love, but she's writing about romance and love and sexy novels of football players, right? And Lily Tomlin was married. Her husband has now died or divorced, and she's kind of alone and her friends helped her face her first bout with cancer, and now she's worried there's another bout of cancer in front of her. And then Rita Moreno definitely is widowed. And I think the story was lived in the assisted living home with her husband who needed assisted living, but she doesn't. And now she's either going to move back home to their home or stay because there potentially is a guy who's interested in her or something. I don't know quite where that story is going or not going, but you're differentiating those women by giving them different romantic or non-romantic involvements.
I just feel like you don't need to differentiate four big personalities that hard is my point. Like, you know what I mean? Like Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda and Rita Moreno and Sally Field are big personalities. Like,
absolutely. But they have to have characters that have lives beyond the friendship. Right. So, and what are those lives?
Yeah.
Are they all single? Are they all together? If they're all the same, that's not interesting. Right. But I feel like those stories really got kind of dropped in bits and fits and starts. And so what's left in the movie is a little confusing. And yet they still spend enough time on it to make you go, what? It does take a minute for the movie to start. And I think it's because they're packing and they're doing this stuff. And you're like, oh, wait, but they're just going on to a plane. Like for the longest time, it felt like they were about to go on a road trip because they were spending so much time picking people up. And then they're just going to the airport. And you're like, what?
Yeah, it's fair.
But they were delightful. Can we just talk about Rita Moreno, who is 90 and is working so much and is like, I want to work more. Why aren't people casting me? And she's just phenomenal. Just phenomenal.
She's great. And she's going to be in the new Fast and Furious movie.
She is?
Yeah. Probably more than likely playing Vin Diesel's mom, I'm assuming.
Yes.
So.
Oh, that's
grandmother.
awesome.
Yeah.
Good for her.
But she is 90. But
yeah.
But then Vin Diesel's not so not so young anymore. Yeah, and I love Sally Field. I'm telling you, I would watch Sally Field do anything. Anything.
She's fantastic. I like her a lot. I mean,
I never think she's got enough to do. I don't think she has enough to do in this movie because I feel like that story with her husband kind of just doesn't go anywhere really. I mean, it has something. I mean, they're clearly doing a little bit of an arc, but it's not as satisfying for whatever reasons, but it's mostly for me because I'm like, I just want Sally Field to have stuff to do. Like I want her to be just chewing up, like, because she's always been one of my actresses that I would watch kind of do anything. I'm with you
100%. I like her a lot. So Sharon, final thoughts on 80 for Brady?
It's a lovely movie where I had a chance to watch some of my favorite 80s ladies, actresses, have a chance to get out in front of the camera and give us all a good time. I'm very glad I saw it. If not for Susan, I would not have. So thank you, Susan. So I think it's something that just about anybody could enjoy, football fan or not, because the football is really kind of incidental. It's just sort of it's the thing that brings them all together, but it's really about these women and their friendship at the end of the day. And I thoroughly enjoyed it.
What about you, Susan?
I'm right there too. I think it's just a perfectly lovely, let's go back to the movies and watch just an enjoyable, delightful movie. And even if you're not a Brady fan, I think there's enough goodwill by the time he shows up and has his scenes. But also, it's also I actually love the football more than I expected to. I loved watching that game, and that game was heartbreaking because I'm a Falcons fan. So, yeah. So I just love it, but I want those women doing other stuff. I want to see them, and I would also check out the One Day. Rita Moreno was in the reboot of One Day at a Time, and quite delightful in that too. So,
and as the resident Tom Brady fan, yes, I would suggest anybody who's into Tom Brady check the movie out. But also, I think there's a lot. I think the Tom Brady stuff is almost incidental in a way. Like, yes, Tom Brady's in the movie. Yes, he produced it. Yes, it's 80 for Brady, but he is an extended cameo in the movie. And so that's not going to get you through an hour and a half long movie. Are the four leads who are so good that, again, give them a hangover movie. Don't do this halfway stuff. Give them something that will be more to their strengths, even allow them to be funny than they are here, which is already pretty funny. So I would be on board with seeing another movie with the four of them or five or whatever the kind of configuration is. But like you mentioned, Susan, we're getting another Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda movie literally here in like a couple weeks. So
I can't wait. I'm in. Moving on.
And on that note, we shall plug the upcoming 4 episodes that we have done, either all of us together or separately. Susan and Sharon and I will be talking about 9 to 5 coming up here pretty quick. And then Susan, you and I and Richard are going to be talking about The China Syndrome, a Jane Fonda movie. Then you and I, Susan, are talking about All of Us. And then we're rounding it out with Susan and I going to be talking a little bit about The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, because Susan and Sharon on 80s TV Ladies are covering 9 to 5. The TV show
starring Rita Moreno.
Yeah, of all people.
Produced by Jane Fonda.
From a movie that Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin were in with Dolly Parton, who made a song for this movie. It all comes back to 9 to 5.
It's like so many Venn diagrams of 80s and ladies and culture cast and 80s TV ladies. So yeah.
So until then, where can people find you and Sharon, Susan? Or where can people find y'all, whoever wants to answer?
Well, 80stvladies.com, 80stvladies.com. You can find me on Twitter in the last branch at Susan Lambert, and you can find us on all the social medias, 80s TV Ladies. And Sharon,
you can find me on Twitter at SJ80TVL, which basically is my initials, 80s TV Ladies, or 80s TVL. So as well as through our website and social media for our podcast.
And of course, on all the podcast platforms, 80s TV Ladies.
And I was going to say, you can find me at Weirding Way Media, where you can also find 80s TV Ladies. Let's just plug it one more time in case everybody didn't hear.
So many Venn diagrams.
But that's where you can find my show, their show, and all the shows that you should be listening to over at weirdingwaymedia.com. As for this show, culturecast.com, patreon.com. You've heard it before. I'll say it again. If you don't want to donate, cool. Just like, rate, and review wherever you get the show, more than likely iTunes. So, Sharon and Susan, thank you both so much for joining me. This was fun. I had no interest in seeing this movie or even realizing that it existed until Susan brought it up. So now here we are. So it's fun how that works out that way.
It really is great. And I just want to make sure everybody knows that you will be coming on to talk about 9 to 5 TV show. So that's there's a lot of fun Venn diagrams happening. 4
or 5 episodes coming up in the future, so you know where to find them. And Susan and Sharon, thank you both so much for joining me, and we'll catch you on the next episode.